it's an unusual song in that it's a charity single that really is based in the charity that it sort of comes from. It's really connected to what it was for. And Steve, I think you can tell the story behind what the single's actually, what the purpose it serves is.
Okay, if we go back 24 years, just on 24 years, 1989, I think it's before any of you were born. Is that right? Is anyone born? No? Yeah? Great, make me feel even older. I was at Hillsborough, and it was one of those occasions where the events that happened right in front of your very eyes stay with you for the rest of your life. And I was a bricklayer at the time, and when we left the Hillsborough Stadium, lots of us were saying, if we could do something to help this, what we'd seen, this tragedy. And the tragedy then turned into an injustice. You'll probably be aware that just a few days later, the Sun newspaper printed lies under the headline, The Truth. And unfortunately, that became the orthodoxy. People, not from Liverpool or Merseyside necessarily, but from around the country started to believe this fiction that the Sun had printed. And so then there became a campaign for truth and justice. And that always resonated with, this going home on the coach, just ordinary lads, and it was all lads, and us trying to think of what we could do to help. And bizarrely, in 2007, the leader of the Labour group in Liverpool asked me to become the Lord Mayor of Liverpool. So I was the deputy in 2007. And in 2008-9, European Capital Culture Year, and 2009, the 20th anniversary of Hillsborough, I was going to be the Lord Mayor. So I contacted some people that I knew in the music industry and said, do you think that we could do something to commemorate the 20th anniversary of Hillsborough, but also to raise awareness? It was more about the raising awareness. We were going to get a chunk of money, and that was really, important. But it was more about we needed to explode this myth that Hillsborough was something to do with hooliganism, and that was still unfortunately resonating at that time. And so we started this was just before Christmas, and we started this. Feasible to do something a leading period then, because it wasn't until the 15th of April at that stage, and we did it, and we picked a song out called The Fields of Anfield Road, which is based on the fields of Athenry, which some of you might know, an Irish song. And we got a studio in Liverpool, and they gave us the time. We got a brilliant producer, and we got lots of sort of Liverpool known music personalities, and anyway, we did it, and we released it, and it got to number 14. It got to number 1 in the downloads, but it got to number 14 in the charts, and that wasn't bad really. We raised, I think, just on £100,000 for the charity. And so, fast forward to the Hillsborough Independent Annual Report, and that was due to come out. And whilst we didn't know its contents, because that was kept very much to what the Bishop of Liverpool, the chair of the panel, had said, it'd be families first. We knew that if it was the truth, it would be much closer to our version of the truth than the Sun newspaper's version of the truth. We wanted to do something. We wanted to ensure that people who read this report were reminded of that 23-year fight to get to the truth, but the ongoing fight for justice. And so again, I contacted some people in the music industry who had taken part previously and said, do you think that we could bring something out? And we had 2 initial meetings, the exact same 5 of us sat around, just knocking things round. And it was decided that we would re-release The Fields of Anfield Road. And that would somehow, that would capture the imagination along with the report. And on the second meeting, as we were all breaking up, Everton, this is on a Friday, Everton on the Monday had done their own tribute after the release of the report. They'd done their own tribute. We played Newcastle United. And they'd had this boy and a girl on the pitch, red and blue, tall, and small, and they had played. Everyone was waiting for it to be "You'll Never Walk Alone," and people will know the football rivalries, Liverpool and Everton. And everyone was expected to be "You'll Never Walk Alone." And anyway, when it asked for silence while he played this, the first bars of the harmonica came in, and you know, older people like us would have recognised it, and some of the younger ones must have been, you know, what this is going on. And it was Bill. It was the original Hollies version, and it was Bill Kenwright's mum. Bill Kenwright is, you might know him. He's an impresario. He does the big shows in London and all that. So, and he was on Coronation Street. But he decided, because his mum's favourite song was "He Ain't Heavy, He's My Brother," to play it, and it was just so poignant. I mean, literally there was a dry eye in the crowd, and we'd seen that. So at this meeting on the Friday, Peter said, "Why don't we?" Peter Hooton from the farm said, "Why don't we get permission to use the Hollies, 'He Ain't Heavy, He's My Brother' on the B-side of what we're doing?" And so we said, "Oh, that's a good idea. Who's going to do that?" "Okay, you contact them." Just the five of us again. And by the time I'd driven back to my house, I'd realised that if we did that and it got to number one, it'd be a Manchester band, the Hollies, that would get the credit for that. And I didn't want that, because Liverpool's got 56 number ones, and it's called, Liverpool is the capital, the world capital of pop. And I thought, I'm not having a mank band getting the credit. So I then phoned Peter from our house and said, "Listen, if we're going to do this, the Hollies thing, I think we should re-record it." And he said, "Well, we've got this other meeting on Friday, and we'll discuss it, but you know, I'm not sure we can do it. The timescales are all wrong, blah, blah, blah." Anyway, he comes to the next meeting, and Peter was on tour with his band, The Farm, in Blackburn, and it was at the offices of the gentleman on my right, who had never met before. I probably have met before, actually.
We shook hands once, but you know,
didn't really know each other. And then went in to try and pitch the idea that not only should we re-record "He Ain't Heavy, He's My Brother" with Liverpool bands, we should actually go for the Christmas number one.
So Pete, he's going to tell you what date this is. It's an incredibly difficult job to try and take this on. And then to take it on only a month or two to actually achieve it. I've got a timeline here, but Pete, can you outline how difficult this is?
well, it was basically the 19th of October on the Friday night. And because I manage The Farm, which is Peter Hooton, and Keith Mullin is a very important guy as well. Keith had basically spoke to me the day before and said, "We're on tour, you're going to have this meeting with Steve Rotherham. He wants to do the Christmas number one. You're going to have to talk him out of it, because it's just not going to happen. And he's going to make a show of himself. He's going to make a show of us. So if you can veer him away from that." Now, Keith is a very experienced guy. He's the head of music at the Liverpool Institute of Performing Arts, the LIPA, Paul McCartney's fame school. So he knows about the music business. He knows exactly how it works, and he knows what's achievable and what isn't. So I went into that meeting basically to poo-poo your idea, wasn't it? And you said, "I want a Christmas number one," and I was like, "Have you seen the time? You know, we've just got absolutely no chance of doing that." Because at the time, we'd approached Guy Chambers about maybe producing it, but I said to you, "Listen, instead of going for the Christmas number one and it all being a bit of a rush job, let's put it back till January. Give us another month and we're guaranteed a number one. It will be number one, I'll promise you, instead of being number 4 at Christmas." But Steve was just, "Listen, this is what I'm going to do. If you would like to come along and help me achieve that, then come on board." Well, ideally, you'd start planning that in, I don't know, before summer, certainly. Most of the major retailers had already done their orders for Christmas around June, July. A lot of people had shut the distribution down. All the supermarkets were like, "No, we're not taking any new singles." And basically, we didn't have a cat in El's chance, because we didn't even have a record. We didn't have a team together. It was just us at the time.
In terms of that distribution, that means if you want to sell a record, you have to make a record, and then distribute it to places that people can buy the record. And
It was, yeah. So by the Monday, I'd rang you back, hadn't I, and said, listen, all right, yeah, let's have a crack at this, because you weren't budging. So it was like, well, I've got to get involved or back out. And obviously, I couldn't back out. I didn't want to back out, but, you know, with dealing with the farm, they were involved, so I had to be involved. And it was basically, you just said, well, run with it then.
I think the beauty is because I came at it from a very naive viewpoint. You knew that it was impossible to do this. Well, it was before this happened, but it was pretty difficult for anybody to have done it because you understood exactly that timeline and the constraints that we had and the fact that we didn't have a budget and we didn't have, you know, a team to do all the jobs that I've now learned from the music industry. Honestly, I've never heard of pluggers before and all this sort of stuff, and I think that was good, because if I hadn't known that, I would have actually agreed with Peter and said, you know what, I think you're right, let's leave it till January.
But you look at this timeline, there's the meeting with Steve on the 19th of October. But there's an announcement in the Houses of Parliament that you're going to do this on the 25th of October. What happened between the 19th and the 25th? What were the things that you were planning, sort of trying to get in place?
Well, on the 19th, just after our meeting, obviously I rang Guy Chambers and he'd 100% confirmed then that he was up for doing this, because at the time...
So do you know who Guy Chambers is? Guy Chambers wrote Angels with Robbie Williams. He actually was involved. He got his first breaks in a band in Liverpool.
He did, yeah.
He's having the Bellow Triple Award winner and blah, blah.
Won loads of Grammys. He's a very, very experienced songwriter, producer. So he's worked with, you know, the Spice Girls and Rebecca Ferguson, Paloma Faith. So his address book was immense, shall we say. So once he got involved, it was basically then we can do a piece of art then. You know, at the time it was going to be done in Liverpool with a Liverpool-based producer. It wouldn't have been a great track. I mean, it could have been great, but we just don't know. But with Guy, we were sort of guaranteed a hit, because the way he produces, he's radio friendly. And it was only a couple of days later, wasn't it? We didn't get Robbie on board initially. It took about a week, but the names were added, like Paloma Faith said, yeah, Beverly Knight, Rebecca Ferguson, all immediately said, yeah. Plus we also I'd been working for the past year with the Justice Tonight band, which was basically touring the world, promoting the Justice campaign. So it was basically the Farm with a backing band, and we had Pete Wiley from the Mighty War, and we had Mick Jones, who's the guitarist in The Clash. And basically they all came on board, so we had, you know, a few extra vocalists. Mick was going to play some guitar on the track. And then the names just started getting added, didn't they, really? It was John McClure from Reverend of the Makers, John Power from Cast, and then we got, who was next? Then it was Robbie Williams. And then, obviously, all the dominoes started to fall then.
And there's a list at the end. I've got a slide at the end that shows a list of everybody that was involved in the project. But then, so on the 25th, when you make the announcement, you're already in a position where you have people are signing on to the project, and you know that you're going to make something.
Yes.
You make the announcement. How does that announcement go?
Well, even that, because of the time scale, that was in danger, if you remember our conversations, but that was in danger of not going ahead. And I'd already said that I booked a room in the House of Commons, and it's not the sort of thing that you can just willy-nilly do. And we'd said, you know, we told people tentatively that this was going to happen. So again, it would have ended up with egg on our face. And so basically, I'd asked Kenny, you'll know him, Kenny Dalglish. I don't know anybody else knows Kenny Dalglish yet. I'd asked Kenny Dalglish to come along, and then I was going to have to say to him, look, it's not all ready, because you come the week after. And anybody who knows the Southern Diaries and these people, it just wouldn't have happened. So we stuck with the date that we had, and then we announced in the House of Commons myself, Guy Chambers and Kenny Dalglish had a press conference, and it was quite well attended actually, but hardly anybody from the music industry. It was more from a sports angle and some people from a human interest angle as well. And we announced that we were going to do this, and we announced that we were going to challenge for the Christmas #1. That's as far as it'd be
As far as it had gone. Yeah.
The official document is now laid down.
Yeah, yeah.
What were the next steps?
Well, just before that, I'd have a chat with Steve and said, listen, we are going to need some kind of budget, and you'd managed to borrow £5,000 off the current Lord Mayor of Liverpool. And it was like, listen, we're going to have to do a 200 grand campaign here for £5,000. And in the end, that's all we spent initially, wasn't it? Yeah. A lot of people, you know, there were certain expenses that we had to incur, which obviously will be paid out of the profits of the single. But when I said to you, we're going to need a plugger, you were like, what's a plugger? It's like, well, somebody who goes to radio stations and persuades them to play your song, and they keep on at them, and, you know, they have to basically give them all a marketing plan. And he said, well, who have you got in mind? So I said, well, the best plugger in the business is a guy called Dylan White. I said, he plugs for U2, Oasis, the Arctic Monkeys. And you just said, well, U2 need a plugger. Surely when U2 release a track, it just gets played on the radio. And it's like, it doesn't, you know. These people have to go in and, you know, cajole people to play things. So I rang Dylan up instantly. I'll do it. I would love to do it. I'll put my heart and soul into it. We'll get this to number one. And it's all like, bloody hell, if he thinks he can do a number on it. So basically, Dylan does national and TV and radio. So all of our, you know, MTVs and things like that. If we were going to do, we couldn't actually get a live performance together, could we? Just the logistics of it. But had we have got the National Lottery show or Children in Need, he would have obviously put all that together. We also needed somebody to do regional radio, which is an absolutely massive job. All your local radio stations, you know, Hallam FM of Northampton got a radio station, BBC Northampton. So, you know, somebody to go out there and basically plug it to all these regional stations. We needed a PR person, and we managed to get LD Publicity in, who basically do the Rolling Stones and Paul McCartney. So that was a coup to get, wasn't it?
And the thing is, all of these people were right at the top end of the scale in their own individual professions. And we weren't getting paid. We knew we weren't going to get any money for it. There was some incidental expenses that we had to, for instance, when the artists travel, because we had to all get them to London and back. Well, Virgin helped us, but there was some other travel costs and stuff. But besides that, everybody that we asked, we said, we'd love you to come on board, but you don't get a penny.
Yeah, but the key one, which obviously only became apparent later on, was online. You all know how important online is now. If you're a musician, you've got to be on Facebook, you've got to have a Twitter, because that's going to be the future of marketing. What's the point taking out an advert in Q magazine for 3,000 people to read for £3,000 when you can pay 100 quid and get a Facebook post out to, I don't know, 20,000 people? So that's the key. So we needed somebody to do our online campaign. So I'd approached a couple of people who were really, really good at running online campaigns. And then Peter Hooton rang me up and said, I've just had a text from a guy called John Mortar, who basically was the guy who got Rage Against the Machine to the Christmas #1 spot. And it was the first time that the X Factor had ever released a single and not been #1 at Christmas. And he said, he's up for doing this. So it was like, bloody hell. You know, he didn't charge the Rage Against the Machine because he invoked that idea. It was who started it. But basically, I know if you want him involved in your project, he's obviously got to pay his rent. He's 10 grand. So I was thinking, we haven't got that kind of money. So when I spoke to him, I just said, listen, we haven't got much of a budget. How much are you prepared to do this for? And he was like, fuck all. He said, I'm an Arsenal fan. What a total injustice it's been. I'd be privileged to knock the X Factor off the #1 spot again. So I'll do it for nothing.
An X Factor actually was the first time they'd been a charity single.
Well, that was after we'd announced, wasn't it? They obviously panicked and thought, oh, we're going to get rumbled again here. So there was two things that happened with the X Factor. The first one was they announced that their single, for the first time ever, was going to be for charity. So obviously tugging the heartstrings of the public to try and get a bit of sympathy. You know, all right, they're charity as well, but so are we now.
Like the fact that we found out that only 23 pence
of every CD went, whereas obviously all of ours went, yeah. So, and then after we'd announced your House of Parliament thing, they then announced that they were withdrawing from the Christmas #1 race. They were going to release their song a week earlier than normal to guarantee themselves the #1 for that week and hopefully then coast into maybe the second week and keep at the number one. But they weren't going head to head with us. I mean, it was lucky in retrospect that they didn't, because I think had he have released in that week, I think they would have got it. So I think them backing out helped us, which was great.
So at this stage, do you have a product? Do you actually...
Not at all, no.
Design. Well, we did have a design because at the first meeting, the only thing that I was absolutely certain about was that the cover of the CD had to be that iconic picture of the boy and the girl. I knew that other people say we'll do a montage of different scarves from different clubs and all that. And I just thought that one image encapsulated and captured everything that the 23-year campaign to that date was about. And so, you know, we knew we had to have that, but then I had to go to a designer. We had to get permissions and rights of people who'd taken the photograph. And obviously it was 2 kids, so we had to get permissions from their parents. And it was an Everton Football Club thing, so Everton then had to... So it just... This can of worms, it was just every time that we went to do something, it just, you know, the simplest thing, it was all the follow-up stuff behind it, and that took an awful lot of time and effort and energy.
But the key thing was, with all of these questions that we had to ask, I can't remember asking anybody to do anything and anyone saying no. Everyone was like, of course, no problem whatsoever. Can we do it? Yeah, of course you can. You know, we didn't have a distribution deal. And obviously, by then, everyone's distribution was, as I've already said, was already sorted for Christmas. So we were sort of left with that. So I rang one of my mates and said, listen, as a fallback, can I use you? And it's a company called Play It Again Sound, called PS. So they're really cool European, but they've come over here now and they do distribution for a lot of small labels, people like Rough Trade and stuff like that. And he was like, yeah, of course, if you can't get anyone better than us, we'll do it. So I thought, well, at least we've got somebody to put the single out. And then we spoke to Universal, didn't we? Who were just like, well, it's a bit too close to Christmas. And it was like, listen, this is going to be the Christmas number one. X Factor are on Sony. You hate Sony. Surely you want to help us stitch them up. And they were like, yeah, that sounds good. All right, then we'll do it. So we had Universal distribution on board. And yeah, once we got that, we sort of pretty much knew that we could get the track out everywhere and we'd have a chance of it being successful.
But it's important that it went into certain specific places. It couldn't go everywhere, absolutely everywhere. It had to go places it can.
Yes, chart eligible shops. Do you know that not everyone who sells records is chart eligible? Yeah, so obviously we wanted every single sale to count towards the chart. So any sale that would have happened at a shop that isn't chart registered with the official chart company, obviously is a sale wasted as far as we're concerned. It would still raise the money, which is key, but to get the Christmas number one, that was the achievement that we were after, to obviously, you know, be a part of history and get that justice word in the history books.
An example of that is that Liverpool Football Club have got lots of shops, retail outlets, and they said we could just sell bucket loads, and that would have been great. But it would have counted towards the chart position. And so Liverpool Football Club had decided then to come on board with us to do the video and other bits and bobs and help us out. And he had to say, great, but you're not getting any stock.
They weren't happy at all. Like, proper shouting at me on the phone. No. Swearing. The head of buying. And she's a girl, lovely, and we've become friends, but this is a fucking disgrace. You are telling me that the biggest thing in Liverpool's history towards the Hillsborough Justice campaign, and you're not allowing us to sell this CD. Now, the 5 shops that they've got in the Northwest, I reckon they could have shifted 30,000 in each shop. They said everyone coming in is asking, where's the single? What, you're not stocking it? She said, you're making us look stupid. But the thing is, we eventually got the Christmas number one by 45,000 singles. I think if 45,001 sales had been in the Liverpool shops, we would have been number 2 at Christmas, so it would have ruined it.
The prize was a slightly bigger prize, which is a bit aware.
Yeah, yes.
Making people understand that
Yeah.
Liverpool people would have been aware of it, but in the UK, right, it would have been international spotlights. Not have that number one stage.
Yeah.
But that's where we did get a fair degree of criticism. It wasn't all smooth. And people will be aware that there's almost a parallel campaign that goes on, and it's the Don't Buy the Sun campaign. And we're obviously very supportive of that because it was the sun that, they say that a lie gets around the world before the truth gets out of bed. And basically that's what had happened with the sun. It's much easier to persuade somebody of something than dissuade them that whatever it was that they now believe to be the truth. And so this campaign had gone on for 20 odd years. And what happened was we were offered some artists, we won't go into the names, but we were offered some artists who overtly had been pro-Sun, who had promoted the Sun in some way. And so we said, you can't have that person on the guy was the artistic director. It was his baby, the actual recording and the voices. But we have to say, that's just a bridge too far. If you have that person on, we're going to have to walk away because of what that person brought. But unfortunately, there were those who believed that it should have just been the likes of your Pete Wiley and none of these international stars that we brought to the table. And there was some criticism against Paul McCartney. But I mean, if anyone can walk a mile in Paul McCartney's shoes, you know, I think he's just completely different because he's off the scale. But others who we criticised over, one of them was Rebecca Ferguson. And unfortunately, that was a group who were racist, misogynist, and who actually used the same tactics that the Sun had used against the Liverpool supporters, because they made stuff up. They made stuff up about it, and because we don't read the Sun, it's very hard then to go back and say, well, she doesn't do such and such a thing, because I'm a regular reader of the Sun newspaper. It was a catch-22 situation. We said that she'd had a column in the Sun and promoted. And anyway, so I get to speak to Rebecca Ferguson, and she said, it's tissue alive. And it's ridiculous. So we had all that in the background that we were trying to keep a lid on because we didn't want it to be seen as being dissenting from the main project. And the main project was exactly what you just said. It wasn't about getting a single out. It wasn't about making a shed load of money. It was about raising awareness of Hillsborough. And that's what we wanted to do, which I think will lead on to why then we commissioned a video for the single.
Just as an aside, do you think that the only way you get things done is by having a really strong vision of what you want to get done? I mean, a lot of people in the music industry might think that by being a bit of a yes man or someone who's willing to do anything for anyone is a good way to get forward. But do you think that in your experience and with different experiences, do you find that it's more important that you are accommodating or that you have a real direct goal you get there?
It's a fine line. You can piss people off in the music industry very, very easily. But I think there's the old adage that there's never a brilliant musician who's ever failed. They failed because they weren't a brilliant musician. You know, if you're good enough, you will be successful. And if you're not, you won't be. And there's few people who aren't good enough that are successful because they play the game or, you know, they've taken the right advice. But yeah, I think it's a fine line. You can, I mean, like you say, you were just, this is what we need to do. We got told that supermarkets weren't going to stock the single. It's too late. We've made our Christmas orders in July. We've got all the stock on the shelves. It's going to be tinsel and all that bullshit. We're not stocking your single. And you were like, not having that. So ring Tesco's up, because obviously the key is if something goes in Tesco's, all the other supermarkets will take stock as well. So I looked at the Tesco website, obviously realised that the chief executive was a Scouser, and he was a Liverpool fan. So I rang his office and didn't get through to him. Oh, cheers, mate. Sorry, I've got bronchitis, so my voice is a little bit... Yeah. So I rang up his office, never got through to him, but I spoke to his lovely PA called Anna, and she said, well, I've got to tell him what it's about. He just doesn't take calls from people who he doesn't know. So I explained what we were doing with the single, and I said, look, and it wasn't a threat, but it was one of those, well, he's a Scouser. If Tesco's don't stock this single, and you're stocking the X Factor single, so don't tell me you don't do singles, what happens if the Liverpool Echo get hold of that story? and it's like the chief executive of Tesco's isn't helping the Hillsborough Justice single. And I said, you know, his kids might get bullied in school. So she just went, listen, all right, I hear you. And then it was literally an hour later, I got a phone call from our guy at Universal, the distributors, and he'd received a phone call from the head of entertainment at Tesco's. And he'd said to him, I don't know who the fuck you've got on your team, but I've just been hauled over the coals, and we will be stocking your single. So we'll have a chat to the stores, and we'll find out how many copies we need, and we'll put an order in by the end of the week.
There is one other consideration, isn't there? And that is, when Tesco's was stocking the X Factor single, they were making money from the sales.
Yeah,
And when
yeah.
HMV is selling other singles, they make a margin. Of course they have to. Unfortunately, we've seen the sort of problems that HMV have hit. But they make a margin. So what we were offering them is, you do all this work for us, you stock it, but by the way, you're not getting anything at all. So our negotiating hand was slightly different than any of the other distributors or any of the products that they had on sale. And not one shop or the distributors or anybody got a penny. It was all ours.
Yeah.
The single that they shifted the most.
Yeah.
So it's a big deal for those guys.
So once Tesco's are on board, then we got Asda, Morrisons, Sainsbury's. They were all like, well, okay, well, we'll stock it then. But yeah, I mean, HMV were brilliant, weren't they? Because they made a pretty big order. I mean, the distributors were only going to do 10,000 copies physical stock. And Steve was like, you're having a laugh. 100,000. I bet you're a pint. Will too.
Pints, by the way.
Oh, you are, yeah. And in the end, we ended up doing 200,000 physical stock, which is just unheard of, basically. I think what it is, normally, do you know the sales split between downloads and physical these days on any usual singles? It's usually one physical for every 5 sold. So 4 downloads, 1 physical. We did about 50-50. Because I think with this kind of thing, because it was a charity thing, it was because a proper cause, people wanted to have something in the hand. So it was heavily weighed in physical's favour. But yeah, sorry, HMV were great, but as we've since found out, there were problems week of release, wasn't there? They wouldn't buy in a load of singles in case they were left with them. Because even though they weren't making any profit, they still had to buy them off us. And they didn't know how it was going to go. We were saying, we're going to be the Christmas #1, you need more stock. And they'd ordered, you know, whatever it was, 100,000. In the end, they needed about 150,000. So week of release, we were struggling to get CDs in. And it's only afterwards, when they went into administration, that we realised why they just couldn't order too many in case they were lumbered with them.
And that actually has an impact. And Sainsbury's, HMV going into administration, they have a certain pot of money that is actually allotted to people that they've sold records, the gift vouchers, etc., that people bought for Christmas.
Well, I'll let Steve tell that. Well, Steve, yeah. I was in my deathbed. He said to me, can you get on to HMV and make sure we get paid? And I was like, I can't. So it was like, well, I'll do it then. So he did it.
He could speak, but one of the beauties of having the title or the 2 letters MP after your name is that when you phone people, they tend to phone you back if they're not there, but if they are there, they tend to get put through. And I got hold of the administrators who were Deloitte, and by just coincidence, I was in here's one. I was in the Savoy.
Oh, okay.
I was in the Savoy. Stephen Gerrard was getting a Football Writers Award, not somewhere I normally go. He was getting a Football Writers Award, and this guy comes over to me and introduces himself, and he's one of the partners in Deloitte. And so I just said to him, you know, nice to meet you. And it's opportune because I've spoken to somebody from your place who's obviously much lower down in the food chain. And I said, I've explained to that person that really you Deloitte don't really want the bad publicity that I can generate for the company, because it's £150,000. We're talking about multi-million pounds that they're dealing with. It's £150,000, and it's charity money. And actually, what you did is it wasn't like one of your ordinary products, because you weren't making any profit on this. for the £2 that somebody handed over the counter, we were getting the £2 back, because one of the other considerations that we forgot was there's VAT, there's VAT on these things. So I wrote to the Chancellor very early doors and said to him, you know, we're going to bring this out, it's going to be the Christmas number 1, blah, 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 and you're going to get loads of money from it, and that's wrong. We want you to waive the VAT. And David Cameron, goes on to the television, and it was something to do with X Factor, wasn't it?
Yeah.
And anyway, he makes an announcement, Cameron makes an announcement that X Factor are going to have the VAT waived. Now, I've already sent my letter off weeks before, and he's going on saying the X Factor, not that he's a publicity junkie at all, but I just thought, well, if the X Factor are getting it, then there's every chance that we'll get it. So we raised this in the House of Commons, and I got somebody who asked a PMQ, a finance question, and Cameron said, I can't make an announcement today, although he did on X Factor because thousands and millions of people watch it. I can't do that today, but the Chancellor will be writing to the Honourable Gentleman and Liverpool Walton, that's my solicitor, and I think he'll be pleased with the response. So we knew that we were going to get the VAT money. So in other words, all of that £2, now when you spent your £2 at HMV, all of that was ours. So it wasn't as if they were making a profit. And anyway, within 2 days of meeting this guy, Deloitte then announced not only were we going to get our money, because I understood that if we got our charity money, then X Factor, another charity company, would also have to get theirs. And not only did he go that far, he mentioned about the vouchers, the gift vouchers that we...
So going back at the timeline, you have to make a recording. You still have to make a recording to get out. So what are the logistics of making a recording for this to take place? Where did it take place? How did people get...
Well, the key was getting, obviously, Guy Chambers involved, and then we had a start date of the 29th of October to start the recording. Luckily, Guy's got his own studio in Primrose Hill, and it's a beautiful place, totally kitted out with every instrument, every microphone that you could possibly imagine. And he was like, I'll get me little band together. So he used Chris Sharrock, who used to be in the Icicle Works, and he basically played the last Oasis tour. He replaced their drummer, and now he's in BDI. And a guy called, oh God, what's his first name? Caitlin Birch, and he's basically the bass player in the Bootleg Beatles. So we already had Paul McCartney on the track playing the bass, but just not the real one. And then Guy played the piano. So that backing track was done in a day on that Monday. Now he'd already booked Robbie Williams and Paloma Faith to come in on that Monday at 6 o'clock in the evening. I mean, you know, what kind of producer would do that? What if something goes wrong? What happens if they don't nail it? But luckily they nailed it on the third take, played it live. And then, yeah, it was ready for Robbie to sing on. We'd already booked Metropolis Studios for the Thursday, hadn't we, to film the video. Oh, no, sorry, it was the Tuesday to film the video, yeah. It was the day after, yeah. And we had Jerry Marsden from Jerry and the Pacemakers, Holly Johnson from Frankie Goes to Hollywood. They were going to come and record their bits at Metropolis. And then we were going to film the video. So, like I say, all train tickets were booked, not knowing if we'd have a track to do. So basically we were taking a big, big chance.
Well, actually, it was a big chance because I got the phone call saying the track's not going to be ready. And everything would be pretty much sorted out for this date.
Yeah.
And just,
For the release date?
for the recording on Tuesday, with artists coming down to London and all that sort of people, you know, spacing people's diaries, and I won't tell you what the word I used to Pete was, but it was, I said that would make me look a four-letter word, and so he said, leave it with me, as he does, very calmly, leave it with me. And then I think it was later on that, even about 2 or 3 hours later, he said, no,
Guy had promised me that we would have something to use on that Tuesday. So whether or not, you know, all the vocals, I mean, most of the vocals are done on Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. So obviously the video, some of that was recorded at Metropolis, but a lot of it was recorded over the following week.
When did Paul McCartney say that he would...
Well, we'd finished the track pretty much. We'd mixed it.
With contacting McCartney right at the very beginning.
Of course, yeah. He was the big name that we wanted, yeah. But there was a guy who was a unsung hero in all this called Davo. And Davo was basically in the Justice Tonight band. He was the guitarist in Big Audio Dynamite. So he was great mates with Mick Jones. And now, because Big Audio Dynamite aren't a band anymore, he's a guitar tech. So he guitar techs for the Manic Street Preachers and the Stone Roses. So his address book is great, but he's just a little scouse. If you heard his voice, it's just, are you all right? You know, proper high-pitched scouse. But he's an absolute legend. Everyone who meets him loves him. And he luckily knew a girl called Sheila Armitage, who's Paul McCartney's tour manager. And have any of you been on tour with a tour manager before? Basically, this person looks after your whole life while you're on tour. Make sure you get out of the bed in the morning to get on the bus. Make sure that you get on stage. Make sure your dressing room's sorted. Tour manager is basically your manager on the road. So this girl and Paul McCartney are so close. Davo said to Sheila, can you have a word with Sir Paul? And she did. And came back to us, didn't he, pretty soon, saying, listen, I think he'll do it. He hasn't said yeah, because apparently his MO is, I'll wait till the last possible second so there's no press lead up or anything, and then I'll just turn up one day. Now, the thing is, the reason we've put Paul McCartney's recording on, we finished recording on the 8th of November, and Paul McCartney said, probably the 9th or 10th, I can do it, but I can only do it on the 20th. That's going to put us back 10 days almost on our schedule. We need the plugger wanted the track for radio. You know, we needed to finish the video. So it was like, is Paul McCartney worth wasting over a week of a campaign, especially when, you know, it was such short notice anyway. And obviously we decided it was. And yeah, great guitar solo, great bit of vocal. Typical Paul McCartney, fingers in the air, but, you know.
What was the necessity for the video? Why did you feel that it was a necessity?
It was to tell that story. It was it was a bit Band Aid-ish, you know, where people come into studios and there's microphones and people are singing, and I had this vision that it would be Band Aid, we would have everybody all in one shot, but because it was recorded over separate sessions, then that wasn't, you couldn't do all of that. If you see it, you'll see that it looks like that's the case, but there are it's different studios actually, and but I also, there had to be a theme in it, and I wanted right at the very beginning of it what I believe is another iconic shot of Anfield, the pitch at Anfield when people came and they started to lay flowers, and there's a beautiful shot. I think it's off the BBC, but we just never had time to get this in. But it starts with a floral design, and it says, "You'll never walk alone." And as you just think it's one, and as it pulls back, further and further and further, and goes to a wide shot, that's what I describe it as. It's a sea of flowers, and it's half of the whole pitch. It's completely covered. And I think that would have told you the story, but because we never had a chance to do that, what I think we did very cleverly is to use the candles, and you'll see shots of the candles, and you think, well, where does this come into it? And then at the end, it is 96 candles that write the word justice. And one of the bits that wasn't shown on there is the last frame, when the little boy turns around and blinks. What happens then is that something comes on, white writing, and then fades into, so you can read it. And it's is that your morning alarm?
Kill it.
That's what time you normally get up, isn't it? This comes on and it turns into the names of the 96. Yeah. So every single person who died. So it's justice for the 96.
Yeah. Yeah, I'm sorry that wasn't on the end there, because you asked me at 6:30 this morning to burn you a DVD. So I got out of bed, went downstairs, and put it in. I must have clicked one of the earlier edits. So, but yeah.
But because, don't forget, the thing was about raising awareness at Hillsborough, that's why there had to be that element in it. And, right at the very end, the bit that Guy Chambers added, and I think it was Paul Heaton, was it, who told him to do it, or was it
The brass band.
the brass band at the very end? So even if you buy the CD, you'll see that the track actually lasts longer than what it says on it, because everything was such a rush. The added bit was 15 seconds longer than it actually is, because this brass band's on it. But the brass band, I think, gave it a Christmassy feeling and gave us enough time then to do that little kid and stuff.
Because the artwork had to be done before the track was finished.
And McCartney's name's not on the original one, because we had to get the insert for the CD produced beforehand. Oh, it was crazy. It was like...
Well, I saw you guys in Liverpool Institute, where you were actually in one of the theatres recording a choir made up of the students that were there. That Guy was conducting, I think. There's some of that in the video as well.
Gospel choir.
Which was a really nice touch in the track to hear that.
Brilliant. And then we got the Royal Liverpool Philharmonic Orchestra, and they are constrained by what they can do because they're contracted to the Royal Liverpool Philharmonic Orchestra, and if they play, they have to be paid. So I said, to the guy who runs the Phil, I said, you have to be on it. And he said, oh no, please to be on it. I said, oh no, you have to be on it, but again, you're not getting a penny either. And so they had to get special dispensation so that the people who played on that, the orchestra, somehow weighed their rights. I wasn't really sure of the technicalities of it, but my stance was, it has to be the Royal Liverpool Philharmonic Orchestra, but you get nothing.
Plus it was Vasily Petrenko, who is their
Not bad, is it?
main conductor of the orchestra, who is the principal conductor for several orchestras across the world, and is probably one of the finest conductors in the world.
It's like the Lionel Messi, isn't he, of the conductors world. Everybody knows him.
He's changed that orchestra phenomenally since he's been there. So by this stage you have a recording, you've got a video, and you need to get that sold and into the shops. And what were the challenges that you faced in terms of getting that? We'll get to the point where you find that you've got the number one, but what were the challenges?
Well, first of all, what we wanted was it to be, the official launch of it to be in Liverpool. So even that, because it was a week before, so then we're phoning to see which we thought was the most appropriate venue for this, and we thought Liverpool Town Hall. We thought we had that stitched up, and unfortunately they had a free booking. So we looked for somewhere, and St George's Hall, it's a shame that we haven't got a bit of footage so you can see this beautiful venue that we eventually launched it in. But we had the first official playing in Liverpool of this, and we invited a lot of the families and artists who'd taken part and other people. And it was without the video, because the video was still
Being edited.
And so we just played into a huge room like this, absolutely packed, and waited for the reaction. And then we looked around, and we just...
A few tissues out.
Honestly, and the families were just literally in tears. And there was lots and lots of press. And so the immediate reactions of those people who had watched that was, this has to go to number one, this is fantastic. So we did it right.
That's just triggered something with me. The original announcement at the House of Parliament on the 25th of October, a couple of days later I was chatting to you, wasn't I, and I was saying we've got to be in the run-in for the Christmas number one with the bookies. So I said to you, do you know anything about gambling? You're on a select committee, aren't you, that deals with gambling. It's like, I don't gamble, but I don't know, how do you do it? So it was like, well, maybe we've just got to send all our family and friends into a bookies and say, can we have a fiver on the Justice Collective? And then if that many people do it, then at least we're on their radar, because all these bookies take out adverts in the paper. The betting for the Christmas number one. It's always the X Factor is the odds-on favourite. How do we get in the running? So, because that's free advertising, basically, having your name on that. Even if you're at the bottom, your name's still on it. So I said, I'll ring up William Hills. So rang up William Hills, got put through to the press department So I just said, I'm from the Justice Collective and we're releasing a single and we want a challenge for the Christmas #1. So can you tell me what's the best way to get in the running for this, please, with yourselves? And he just laughed at me and I just went, God, I've made a dickhead of myself, haven't I? You know, I don't know how it works then, obviously. And he just went, you're already the odds-on favourite with us.
The Christmas #1.
Yeah. So it's like, how did that happen? And he went, well, as soon as you did the announcement last week, serious money went on. So he said, are you online at the moment? So I said, yeah. So he said, well, go on to Odds Checker, which is basically, it's the money supermarket of bookies. So you go on, you put in Christmas #1, and it has a list of the artists and then all the bookmakers along, and it has them ranked in order of, and we were basically the odds-on favourite with every single bookmaker in the country.
If we had had 100 quid on us to be the Christmas #1 on the 19th of October, we would have been very, very rich people now.
Yeah. We'd have obviously donated it to the cause, wouldn't we? You know.
I don't bet so.
But so we need to kind of rush forward. You guys
Yeah.
catch the train really soon. But on the way to the announcement, there are all sorts of problems, like shops will run out of records and they need to stop and stuff like that. It's not a case of you have people to do this. You end up doing this yourself. So keep tours and try and make sure that stores that were the main stores in Liverpool were actually stocked.
Well, HMV obviously were going through financial difficulties, which we know about now. Well, there was rumours, but the Liverpool stock basically ordered 30,000 copies and they sold in the first 2 days. They weren't going to get a reorder until the Friday, and this was on the Wednesday, and it was like, we're going for the Christmas #1. If you've sold 30,000, you might sell another 30,000. And I think, you know, if they hadn't have got orders from other places, so they started to get stuff shipped up, which was going to be there the Thursday, but that meant they didn't have anything on the Wednesday. So I basically said to the manager of HMV in Liverpool, if you can ring around all the stores within driving distance, I'm happy to go to all of those stores, get whatever stock they've got and deliver it to Liverpool 1. So me and the missus spent the whole day driving around and delivering stock to Liverpool, which, you know, I don't know if that, I'd have scuppered it if that hadn't been done, but it certainly...
You realise how much effort actually goes into this, which is personal effort. I'll just call up my boy to do this.
I know, this was literally, it was done on a shoestring, and it was a bit Heath Robinson at times, wasn't it?
Yeah.
But we cobbled together stuff like, for instance, I didn't know about being able to download something on a mobile phone by texting a number.
Yeah.
And he got this fella, who was the top guy, who then gave us, I still remember, 80010.
Well, it still works.
Oh, does it?
You can still text justice to 80010 and buy the track.
Play your part. It's £1. I know you students, but a knicker, that's...
Yeah.
I know that's 2 pints in a student bar, isn't it? But it's £1, and if you do 80010, which we all did on that day on the 19th, then it wasn't being released until the 17th. That was the other thing to remember. On the timescale, we've decided to go for the 17th of December, which gave us no wriggle room at all. People were desperate to buy it beforehand, and we were putting people off. So we, on the 17th when we launched it, that was the first day you could physically buy it. You could go to the shops and you could download it. So we built up this momentum and expectation of something would be there, but there was nothing there. And we sold thousands and thousands of copies, tens of thousands of copies on this number.
Yeah.
But there was nothing, so you were paying your £1, but you had to wait 2 weeks perhaps before something physically came on your phone. But that was another avenue. We used every opportunity, every avenue, all these new technologies. Things that I think that others will learn from now, that what we've done. But we used all this, like the social media and everything, to try and get the message out.
And then there comes the release, when they actually announce it on the 23rd of December. So what happens when they actually announce it? What's the process?
Well, one of our team, very helpful guy, was called Paul Quirk, and he's actually the chairman of the Entertainment Retailers Association, which sounds very impressive, but he's just a guy from Ormskirk who basically used to have an independent record shop in Ormskirk. And he's retired now, so he's able to take up this post of chairman. So he's basically not in charge of, because it's just a body. He basically admins it, but it includes Tesco's, HMV, you know, every record shop in the country. He is the head of the union, if you want to call it that. He's also a director of the official chart company. So all the way through the campaign, he was tipping us off. Unofficially, yeah. I mean, he doesn't mind it now because it's gone now. There's nothing to do. But you know, he was saying, listen, you need to have a word with such a body at Sainsbury's because they need to get more stock down here. And oh yeah, by the way, these aren't very helpful. So if you bypass them, I'll give you this name, and then that's their boss, and then they'll tell this person, you know, what to do. So basically, he was telling us every day from the day of release. So he rang me up on the Tuesday morning and said, all right, this was at 8 o'clock in the morning. He said, it's not announced till midday, but at the moment, you're 3,000 sales behind James Arthur for the #1 spot. So it was like, okay, we need to push here. So obviously we got onto everyone, didn't we? The press girl, the pluggers, just saying you've got to get more radio plays. So they were ringing up the radio station saying, listen, can you hammer it today?
We had stadium pluggers.
Yeah, another key. Sports stadiums, they play music. Someone plugs to them. So we managed to get the best guy in the country in. And he was going to do it for nothing, wasn't he? Because he's not a Liverpool fan, but he's a big football fan. And you said to me, do we really need him? And it was like, well, yeah. And you said, speak to George, who's the stadium announcer at Anfield, George Sefton. And you said, if George has heard of this guy, then let's use him. So I ring George and say, have you heard of Tom Roberts at Shoot Music? And George just said, I'm renowned as a great stadium announcer. The reason is because of Tom Roberts. He tells me 6 weeks before what's going to be in the top 10. He'll tell me what the latest songs are going to be, and I start playing them, and everyone thinks, wow, George played that months ago. He said, so I look really good. So we got this guy in, and obviously we were getting played at Wembley Stadium. He basically tells Sky and all the soccer shows what to play. You know, the background music when they're doing goal montages. We got on all of them. Yeah, sorry. So the week of release, we were getting tipped off by Paul Quirk where we were. So on the Tuesday morning, just based on the Monday sales, we were behind James Arthur by 3,000. So we thought, fucking hell. But we were way ahead of the #3. So we knew we had a top 2 hit. So we hammered it that day on the social networking. And by the Wednesday morning, we were 24,000 ahead of James Arthur. So then it was a battle to keep in front, wasn't it? But I was waiting for Paul Quirk to ring me up on the Sunday when the chart was going to be announced. And they don't announce it until 7 o'clock at night on BBC One. So I was waiting for Paul to ring me up, and at 8 o'clock, our PR girl at LD Publicity rings me. And I was thinking, oh, fuck off, yeah, I don't know, you know, I'll ring you. So I answer the phone, it's like, hiya, Jane, and she just went, congratulations. And I was like, what? And she went, I've just had an email from the official chart company's head of PR saying, can we chat about the statement that we're going to make later because you're the Christmas #1. So it was like, listen, is there any chance that this is wrong information? She was like, we are Christmas #1. So it was like, all right, sound. So obviously gone on the phone to you, didn't I? Are you sitting down?
Staggering.
Yeah.
And even that James Arthur you just mentioned, he even tweeted and said, I've done really well, I'll get a gold disc, blah, 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 but I think people should go out and buy the Justice Collective single. So I thought that was fantastic. I don't even know him, wouldn't recognise him, never seen the guy before. But I think it was really, really good. It just shows you that, you know, the X Factor gets out, and I'm one of them, I hate the X Factor and all that. But there's somebody who obviously had a bit of a social conscience.
But there's a side story to that, isn't there?
I don't know.
We're all saying about Cowell not being stupid. No. This was on the Thursday. And obviously we knew we were beating him on physical sales, but on downloads, if you go onto iTunes, you know, in the right-hand corner, you put the singles in. That's real time. What's in the chart there, and it can change by the minute. You can actually watch it change as someone moves up the chart position. So we were #1 in the download chart. James Arthur text saying, I want Hillsborough single to be the Christmas #1. All go out and buy it. within an hour, he'd had 15,000 retweets of that. And everyone was going, oh, James Arthur, he's lovely. I better buy a single. He went back to number 1 in the fucking charts by saying that he wanted us to get to the Christmas number 1. So it was like, you bastard, you know. Yeah, so very clever. But, you know, in the end, a day or so later, we went back up to number 1.
Okay. One of the things that you still have a responsibility you have to take on now after the whole, you've won the race to beat Christmas number 1, we have race to awareness, but it must be things
The financial stuff is the important one because that goes into a charitable pot. You've got to say what the reason the money's going to be used for. The money's going to be used for the continued legal fight and campaign for justice. So it will be part of my job was to ensure that there's fresh inquests, and I've been fighting for them since I've been down there, but the Attorney General applied to the High Court and we'll get fresh inquests. Now, we don't know where they're going to be held. We know that the public purse will pay for the legal costs. So, lawyers and barristers, that type of stuff, that will all be paid for. But if it's to be in Doncaster, which it's under their jurisdiction, that will mean a lot of travel for the families. And what people don't understand is that their loved one died. The police officers got £330,000 in compensation for post-traumatic stress disorder. Got less than 2,000 for the deaths of their kids. Some of them never even accepted £2,000. But what they had to do is to get loans because they had to go to Sheffield, and it was the longest coronial, in other words, the coroner's inquest, longest coronial case in British legal history. So they were going for months and months and months. And you'll know if you have to travel, from here to London, you have to do that every single day for months and months and months and months. Where does that money come from? Because eventually, even the bit that you had saved up is gone. What we wanted to do is take away the headache of them having to think, oh my God, if it's in Sheffield, if it's in Doncaster, wherever it is, how am I going to get backwards and forwards? There are a lot of people, because of this, unfortunately, are on benefits. And I know benefits have got a really bad name because of what the bloody government is doing about, SCADAs and shakers and all that sort of stuff. I'm talking about people who, for ill health reasons, are on it. And there are some people who are really lowly paid who are also on benefits. Because benefits is not just people out of work, as you'll know. There are people. And what we wanted to do is to ensure that they don't have to think, do I get to eat or do I get to go to see this part of this lengthy process that's going to be the inquest. But besides that, because we've now got the truth out with this proposed independent panel report, there's likely to be prosecutions, criminal prosecutions and perhaps private prosecutions, but there will be corporate manslaughter and individuals. So this might go on for another 2 years. So it might be that the £500,000 that we've got is not enough.
Yeah. And plus, the FA, everyone was saying to me, oh, get onto the FA because they'll help. And it was like, well, they won't because they're one of the companies that might be getting sued because they allowed the match to take place in a dilapidated stadium which didn't have a current safety certificate. And the two people who were running the FA went to Sheffield Wednesday Football Club the week before the semi-final to supposedly inspect the ground. And the chairman at Sheffield Wednesday said, when they turned up, the first question was, what's for lunch? That's all they were interested in. It was just a jolly from London. They didn't care that the ground wasn't capable of holding that kind of game. So basically, I spoke to one of my friends who's very high up in the FA and said, listen, I've been asked to ask, but can you give me the official party line on whether the FA are prepared to get behind this Hillsborough single? Because obviously, emails out to the FA, the worldwide football community, could have been very helpful for publicity for us and marketing. And obviously, we got the official word back from the chief executive of the FA that, sorry, we can't do anything because we're going to be raising money then for you to sue us. So...
Which brings us back to this.
Would have been a nice twist.
This is a fantastic, successful story and a much longer, much more serious project. But thanks very much for coming. coming here
Yeah.
and sharing with
Pleasure.
us. It's fantastic.